How are you?
How you doing?
I'm good. Can you see me well? Is the light better this way or this way?
Maybe that way because the light was coming.
Okay,
It's kind of yeah,
sounds
beautiful.
good. How are you?
Okay, so all right, y'all. Waiting for folks to come in. Y'all are very prompt today. So I'm Therese Nelson. You all have seen me on here for months and months. But Fridays now at 1 is going to be my little Black food folks time because I think there's something really particular about the work that's happening on the Black food folks page proper. So um, I'm excited that this is my first official conversation for this new series at 1. And it really wasn't, I was trying to think of like the framework for the conversations I wanted to have here.
Mm,
And it really was just kind of about folks who are thinking really critically about food culture, right? The ways in which we engage this practice of thinking about our identities in the food we cook and how we sort of present it to the public, right? To just folks in our relative community. And because of that, I think the person that I was so excited to have on first was not other than the very brilliant Ozoz Sokoh. Some of you may know her as Kitchen Butterfly. I feel like your name has been in the ether for so long, but I just there's something about the moment, this particular moment, waking up to like wake up the first thing in the morning, you get on Instagram, start checking your socials, and you're there in these amazing live videos with this I don't know calm but such like intentional cooking first thing in the day, and it's something about it that has just been striking me really particularly through this moment. So I don't know, I was excited to get a chance to have a real chat with you.
thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for bringing me in to usher this time as you shared. I think it's really important that we, learn from each other, also be incredibly encouraged by each other. I think it's very interesting because I'm Black, I'm Nigerian, right? And it's a very different experience from being Black and anything else. And I find myself still learning so much about the African American experience, the Caribbean experience, and just being Black in other places that aren't historically Black. And, every day I'm like, oh, wow, I'm learning so much. And a lot of it is agonizing, but I have to say that I can see what is beyond that pain and the hurt. I have visions of a brilliant, excellent, amazing space for Black food, wherever it comes from. And, so it's always nice to talk to people because I learn so much. I learn so much from inquiry. I learn so much from having to think about things in ways that I haven't thought about them before. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So I think that's a really particular and perfect place to start because I think for folks in food, I think we get entrenched so deeply in the food space. This is really particular bubble that kind of insulates us in some ways. But I think there's also this sort of moment where we're using food history, sort of food media, food writing, these spaces that aren't like specifically in the kitchen. These spaces to sort of interrogate sort of our identity outside of those spaces. So to say another way, like this particular moment feels like so much of the device that we use in the lens of food helps us to sort of think about spaces outside of food. And so I guess I'm thinking about your work because your life was in science. There's something particular about the way you approach your practice. I mean, even in the ways in which you sort of lay out the framework of your academic is the wrong word, but sort of your culinary practice, it really is particularly methodical and it's thoughtful in a linear way. And I guess we don't have really clear language, I don't think, in the food and culture space to sort of define what the work looks like, right? What culinary inquiry looks like practically, but you have such particular words for it. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about this idea of new Nigerian cuisine, but the framework of culinary, like history, anthropology.
Okay. So for me, yeah, my journey with food has been progressive. I started out my childhood hating food. I didn't eat till I was 9. And then I started cooking and eating. A key defining moment for me was when I went to university in the UK, in Liverpool. And for the first time, it wasn't the first time I'd been away from home. It was the first time I was away from home abroad. And food became about comfort. It wasn't even so much as identity at that point in time. It was really about comfort. And I was studying geology. And one experience that stands out is, like when university, we had money, right? But, there were times when I was broke. And I remember buying a jar of Dorito salsa once. And I bought it and, it was nice. We had it with nachos. I go through phases where, if it's nachos, then I'm cooking and eating nachos for weeks on end, and then I move on to something else. And it's the way that I learn. But I bought this jar of salsa, and it was nice. And then I looked at the ingredients. It was like 70% tomatoes, 20% peppers and onions. And I was like, oh, I could recreate this. That's the very first time I can remember taking, reading something almost scientific, because it was about proportions and ratios, and bringing that into the kitchen and making a version that beat that jar of salsa hands down. And I've been making it for 20 years. But that was one of the very first excursions into bridging that kind of more mathematical science with the art of cooking. And then the next key thing for me that really broadened food and made me start applying a more experimental approach was when I lived and worked in the Netherlands. And that was when I started my blog, around 2009. I started exploring ingredients. I'm a geologist. I worked as a geologist. I worked as an exploration geologist. And exploration geologists have this approach. They have a mindset about going from the known to the unknown. They have the idea about, they have principles around building things systematically, starting off with one idea and then progressing. But there's also a creativity with exploration geologists that help them envision the future. You're always starting in this place where you don't know, you know what A is, but you're trying to get to X, Y, Z, right? And you're letting A guide you, but you have to have the mindset, you have to have the eyes to see, to conceptualize, to think, to develop, and imagine what X might be based on A. And it's weird because I was crap at geology. I hated it. I hated it because it wasn't what I wanted to study, but my father was like, look, I'm not going to spend my pension sending you abroad to study something that you can do in your spare time. I wanted to be a writer, so I wanted to study literature. So I'd grown up writing. Writing was always a part of my life. We wrote compositions about everything from the dog we didn't have to our best holiday and our favorite foods and all of that. But that framework of exploration geology really helped me develop structures and methods around documenting, approaching, recording, observing food. And I always say that for me, even though I didn't want to study geology, there's so many things that I've learned from it. So one is the frameworks. The other is what I like to think of as sensory exploration. And that for me is I use my eyes, my nose, I use all my senses. I may not know what a thing is, but I should be able to describe it regardless. So I should be able to say, you know, this is the color of the fruit. This is what the skin texture feels like. This is what it smells like. This is what it, you know, when I tear it, when I cut open into it, these are the aromas, fragrances. When I taste it, this is what it, you know, this is what it tastes like. So I don't even have to know what it is, but just being able to do that sight, smell, taste, feel, touch gives me enough data to research, to dig deep, to ask questions, and to find out what that thing is. So yeah, the geology has really helped me. And for me, the new Nigerian kitchen is really about, I believe that Nigerian cuisine is amazing. I believe that it, you know, it hasn't quite reached its deserved place. And to an extent, I understand the things that are holding it back.
Okay, talk about it, because this is something I'm serious. I talked to Simeon Hall week before last, and he's sort of based in the Caribbean. He's in Hawaii now, but I'm really interested in this kind of diaspora conversation, because I think there's something that we've missed in the ways in which we frame this sort of quest for, this search for, this like this sort of framing of this kind of global Black experience in the space of food, right? We talk about these cuisines that have pride of place in our culture, but don't necessarily have pride of place or have a real translation or function in sort of the larger, more mainstream world. And I think a lot of times we get real muddy real quickly when we're talking about the value or power of these cuisines, because we're talking about them in relation to these larger mainstream spaces. And so I'm thinking about people like, so I've been to our Fulani cuisine, thinking about this cuisine doesn't have context in terms of restaurants or even in the imagination of folks outside of that culture, but should have pride of place, should have, you know, that there are correlations that people can see in the ways in which these cuisines are framed that are valuable and dope and delicious. And shouldn't you think about these? But I think it comes down to like specificity, right? Like if we have, you have to first think about the diaspora as unique and individual and not this kind of homogenous thing. And so I don't know, I would love like that's like right, because I think there's something really interesting about the specificity of your new Nigerian framework, because it is asking you to think about Nigeria as a particular place, not just West Africa, not just, you know, but particularly. But no, I want you to talk about what you think the setbacks are.
I mean, you raised so many great points. The points about why Nigerian and Black diasporic foods aren't in the mainstream. First of all, I think they should be, but I know that mainstream media has a problem with things of Black association. And I think that the more I read and research, I realize that this is something that stretches way back to the transatlantic slave trade. However, that is not going to stop us from putting our cultures and cuisines in pride of place. Now, I'm particular about the Nigerian because that's my lived experience. That's the most dominant experience that I've had. I've lived abroad. I'm living in my third country, right? I live in Canada now, and have since January of this year. But I'm primarily Nigerian, like at the root, at the core, you know. I read Nigerian jokes and I die because, you know, I get it. And I think, you know, the one thing that I've been able to do consistently is I've been able to look at cuisines as cuisines, right? So French cuisine is French cuisine. And I've also been able to establish similarities between them. One thing that generally holds most people back is that there isn't, I feel like there's global culinary language, right? And then there's specific cuisine culinary language. For instance, in Nigeria, what we refer to as a stew is a specific dish, not a process. It's a tomato-based stew that's similar to red sauces. It's similar to like an Italian ragu, right? But if there is no bridge to connect an Italian ragu with my Nigerian stew, people just don't get how similar they are. I look at Indian curries, and Nigerian soups, which are actually stews, not soups. They're not drinking soups. They're actually stews, right? They're a combination of vegetables and protein and things like that. Indian curries, Thai curries, and Nigerian soups are very similar. But if there's no one kind of showing the equivalence, showing that, okay, at the roots of it, the very essence, the framework, the core, they're similar. They may use different ingredients, they may cook them in different ways, but at the core, they have the same framework. So my mind is always is mostly in a framework mode when I'm thinking about food, when I'm thinking about the things I'm making. I'm thinking about a Nigerian broth. We call it pepper soup, but that's one of the only that's probably the only drinking soup we have in Nigeria. Like traditionally, it's one of the most common drinking soups, but it's very similar to a Vietnamese pho. It's chicken soup, right? So I find myself in this position where I'm constantly translating what Nigerian food is. And for me, the new Nigerian kitchen is not it's not limited in its exploration to contemporary approaches. For me, it's really getting under the hood. It's documenting, because I think that's where Black food doesn't have the legs it should, the lack of documentation. And so for me, the new Nigerian kitchen is primarily, first and foremost, about documenting on my blog, my website, wherever I write, whatever publications I write for. When I speak, it's around that documentation. It's about culinary, cultural identity preservation. I want my children to go into the world. I have 3. Go into the world and be able to find, they want to cook something Nigerian. I want them to be able to find a recipe, whether that's mine or someone else's. So from my point of view, that's my main goal. It's really around that. It's rooted in identity. It's rooted in cultural preservation and history. I feel like there's a lot of our history and our culture that has been erased. And, in my short life, if I can make a difference with documenting as much as I can, and that's why I share as much as I do. That's why I Instagram. I love Instagram, but that's why I Instagram. I blog. I share as much as I can. Yeah. Did I miss any?
No,
okay.
100% nailed it. That brings me to this. To talking about really the framework of Kitchen Butterfly, because I feel like this moment, like the 2008, 2009 moment, was really transformational for a lot of people. I think it had a lot to do with just, I know here in the U.S. for me, it was politically, you're talking about this sort of, shift into an Obama presidency, talking about the economy downturning really dramatically. I think the food industry as a whole was having a really particular moment of identity crisis is too fine a point, because it would suggest that there was a sort of conscious kind of pivot, but I think that there was a really particular fertility to that sort of 2008, 2009 moment. And I know you started the sort of seeds of what Kitchen Butterfly is now back then. And so I guess I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the sort of birth of it, because it's such a particular and beautiful house for all of this inquiry. And I guess, how do you start a journey with
that? So it was, I think in my life, 2009 will always be the year. Well, I've had other years that were instructive, but 2009 kicked my backside.
Yeah.
I was living abroad. I was in my 30s. I was 33, right? I was unsure of myself. I was an expat working in the Netherlands, but I was being treated like an immigrant. And I know that there shouldn't be a difference, but there was. I was an expat. I worked in an oil and gas company. But it was just this period of everything just being turned on its head. I didn't really feel like I knew who I was. I didn't feel like I knew what I wanted. I had a great job. I was a geologist. I was working, but I was very unsure of myself. And just through a process of speaking to people, having numerous coaches and mentors, realizing that I could start a blog because I'd been reading blogs for like 10 years before that. But I'd never felt like I was capable of doing that. And, it was just that year. I was like, you know what? I may not be happy at work and I may be failing at work, but I'm going to create and craft this space for myself. And it was really about realizing that work was only one slice of my life. Like, like if I had a pie, there were other segments that were as important, but I was neglecting them because I was looking for validation and acceptance. And I was just like, you know what, damn it. I'm already on a slide. So, whatever. But it's amazing because it really turned things around for me. First of all, I had this space where I was myself and where I could express myself, where I could explore. And I know that it sounds like, just this space where we can find ourselves, but honestly, it was therapy, and it continues to be therapy for me. I find it's healing. When I'm upset, the art of prepping vegetables, smelling lime, like it uplifts my soul and my spirits. And I'm not opposed to therapy as in seeing a therapist. And I have done that, but food is just that place that I found solace and comfort and energy. And I could be my fullest self and bring my fullest self. I could turn up, and food is so forgiving, right? That, you can make something today, doesn't quite work out, but there's always tomorrow. And just that hope, that possibility just really went into helping me create the space that is Kitchen Butterfly. It was just my canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important, because I think there's this, and you tell me if you agree, this moment we're in, especially the last year or so, it's feeling very fruitful in that so much of work the last decade or so, I think, has been laying the framework, or sort of laying the foundation for folks to really be more full-throated about identity. This idea about and sort of the documentation part of your practice, but certainly the sort of rigor of it, I think is really kind of about that point you made earlier about us having a lack of documentation, this sense of being able to point to a cuisine, or point to a culture, and to be able to have that connective, like that click that lets you sort of, that you're inroad into it. So much of your work looks like, or feels like, that documentation part. And so there's a freedom now to be able to write with more authority, because you backed up by receipts, right? You backed up by this foundation you built for all these years.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm thinking a lot about it now, because food media as a construct, I think, is shifting really dramatically. And I'm wondering if you're looking at, because you said you're in Canada now, if you're thinking about, I'm thinking also about folks I'm talking to in London, also on the continent, who are writing a lot more extensively, who maybe, working as a professional chef, or maybe doing work that's directly in the kitchen, but also seeing the power in moving that thought outside the kitchen and sort of creating these pieces, whether it's a blog, whether it's a cookbook, whether it's whatever, prose, whatever that looks like. The necessity of the words, and the necessity of sort of finding space outside the kitchen to give people this, tactile kind of connectivity is really important. But we didn't I think so much of it is that we didn't necessarily have the tools yet. And I don't know, I don't know how you think about that, but because I know you have another, I want to get to it soon, but this project that I saw you about, was it Abora? this kind of
What-
this sort
Abori.
of yeah,
Abori.
abort.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
It's like that, but
so
that's something that feels like it had to exist in the moment that it existed. Like it wouldn't have been possible even 5 years earlier.
I think timing, timing is important, right? And I agree with you that we need to, like, the kitchen is the fulcrum, it's the center. I also feel like, human beings should have their full form of expression, right? So if you want to integrate your love of plants or sunsets with food, do it. I used to think there were rules, but we create the rules, and we just fully own you, own what you want to do, own how you want to do it, and just find your forms and your mediums and media of expression. Find your way. And um, lost my train of thought. What do you want me to talk about Abori, or you said something before that?
Well, I definitely want to talk about Abori, but I think I was just sort of thinking about how you thinking about your work and the practice, and your practice in this particular moment. Because I think that food media is it's been democratized in a lot of ways. Like there's a way in which like the okay, talk on it.
Slowly. I think that there are many platforms that I've loved and probably will love from a distance, now. But I realized that, with all the things that have been going on, with some people, it's just been like really easy to proclaim and to say and actually not follow through. And, in writing, they say you have to kill your darlings, right? You have to, those things that you hold dear, that you think are central and crucial to the story, that sometimes actually aren't. They're just your own personal projections. So I realized that some people I'm going to have to say, some relationships I'm going to have to break up with, but because not everything is for everyone, right? It's not everything. I desire so much, but not everything is for me. So I need to also learn to recognize where I'm wanted and where I'm not, to quietly pack my bags and go, because there's enough room. I think because of the conflict between wanting to make a living, wanting to be seen by mainstream media, and wanting to have space for your writing, I sometimes have been misguided. But I'm so grateful for friends who have fought on my behalf, but also helped me see. Sometimes, you're in a bad relationship and you're getting the vibes, but you don't want to. As Nigerians will say, you want to die on the line, right? But you know that this thing. So there's that. For me, this period should bring us clarity as individuals.
Yes.
I spend a lot of time with myself in reflection on what is it that I really want. Money, love, food. I want my ideas, regardless of whether they're hinged on Nigerian cuisine or whether they're from any other cuisine. I want them to be appreciated and respected. So once I find, I have to do those checks often. The other thing is, I'm really passionate about coaching and mentoring, in the sense of how do we help younger people begin to explore these things, begin to build up bodies of work, even as they're young. So I try to encourage my children, not force them, but I try to encourage them to develop other interests that they can bring together in the end to create magic according to them, right? Ways they can connect, fuse, combine different aspects of their being, of their history, of their personality and heritage. My parents, I grew up in a camp where we foraged for fruit. So a lot of the things I know about fruits now, I knew when I was a child. Like, I had so much head knowledge that I didn't even realize was a big deal till I started talking to people and they didn't, they were like, oh, how come you know this? I'm like, I grew up, climbing this mango tree. Like, I knew, for instance, that hibiscus and okra were related before I knew they were scientifically related. Because hibiscus leaves, when you rub them, they give you that, they have the mucilage that okra does. So I knew all of those things before I even knew the science of it. I also really think that we have to bring a lot of memory. We have to force ourselves to remember some of the things that our parents told us, and grandparents and older people, because there's a lot of treasure there. And it's why I admire greatly the work that Tony Tipton Martin has done with the Jemima Code. Mind blown. And I hope that in a few months I can share something that I've built using all that information that she's shared and laid out. I really am working hard to make sure that I'm able to share this thing. Because again, when we mine, there's history and there's culture there. And when we mine that and we bring forward to the present, to the now, it can inform a lot of the direction that we take. It's also a very good foundation for learning, for teaching, because in Nigeria, it's so painful that home economics, Nigerian geography, Nigerian food and nutrition are not part of the curriculum anymore. So annoying. I'm like, why? That's a real opportunity to teach people about history and heritage and culture. And because we're increasingly becoming global, right? And I want to navigate this world confidently as a Nigerian, knowing my history and culture, knowing when to push back and say, sorry, you don't speak to me like that for no reason, or, oh yeah, well, actually I can counter, and I'm not always on the offensive. I'm not talking about always being on the offensive, but I'm saying that there's something about knowing who you are and knowing where you're from that puts you in a position where it is, no shaking. Nigerians will say no shaking. Like, I don't need to get, you want to get my hackles rising, but I'm okay. No shaking. I'm fine because I know who I am and where I've come from.
That's right. Because this notion of agency, right? Like, you enter spaces and you are covered in a particular kind of agency that allows you to define how you enter those spaces, how you navigate them, and it's hard to do that when you don't have any tangible foundation. I don't know. I love so much the way you frame this practice, because I think I always go back to Renee Grossman, because I think she have her someone who gave us the language, culinary anthropology, kind of gave us the like permission, the sort of license to think really, to move center into our culture, right? To think about Blackness as not the firm space to value, but sort of the central place. And if you did that, then all of a sudden you had to examine the world and what the world had to offer in a new framework, right? You have to, I wonder about, because you talk about the Netherlands, you talk about being in Canada now. I guess I'm wondering about how the framework of Nigeria, the sort of the taste and the food that kind of is it's right there in the back of your mind. It is on your palate. It informs how it shows up in your work. Because I think a lot of recipes one of the ways that one of the building blocks you sort of talked about was sort of the foundational ideas around your principles is sort of this being beholden to an ingredient, but almost being willing to be playful. Like, do you know what I mean? To sort of say, like, this is the baseline. This is what the stew is. This is what the flatbread is. This is what the thing is. But in this place, in this, like, this moment, this is the ingredient I'm going to use, and it's going to be just as authentic. It's going to be just as particular, and it's going to be as respectful of the broader culture, but it does not have to be beholden. It has to be beholden to place. So I'm wondering what that looks like in Netherlands and Canada and Nigeria.
So for me, I've always thought about how an ingredient is an ingredient is an ingredient. And I always start, I'm deeply respectful of food. I approach it with honor. and that's a given for me.
Mm.
I also don't like to waste. So between those bookends and my thoughts and my philosophies, I am very okay making a Nigerian stew, for instance, with palm oil and egusi, which are like pumpkin seeds, toasted. Not toasted, but I like to toast mine. So I don't mind. That is my starting point is one of reverence. However, if I decide that I want to make foam of my palm oil, I always encourage people to think of it as I'm in my kitchen, I'm spending my money, I'm spending my time, and as much as I want you to engage and, but you don't get to choose how I use my palm oil. You don't get to dictate to me how I invest my time and energy and then come to me with, I mean, there are Nigerians who have sworn for me, like they've wished me ill because, yes, because I did something that they didn't think was, that they thought was so outrageous. And I think people miss the point a lot because, like I said, the core, respect, honor, reverence. The second thing is, the way I think about food is stepwise. I've grown with food. I've grown comfortable with ingredients. I study. I spend half of my day head stuck into articles and books. So there's nothing that I cook that I haven't done homework and groundwork, or that I haven't experienced in. Like, it may look like such an outrageous or new idea, but it is founded on, like, it's anchored. And I want people to kind of know that this is not just something frivolous. This dish is anchored in previous work. So for me, I love the traditional flavors of Nigeria. When I'm craving stuff, it's usually Nigerian, something Nigerian. But I'm also happy to take those same ingredients and put them in the context of other cuisines, and take whether it's those same ingredients, whether it's an approach, whether it's flavors and techniques, because for me, life is for the living, right? And it's really about, I want to explore the fullness of as much of what I want to do. Like, I'm in my 40s, right? I can't keep answering to every wave of criticism. And I'm just like, look, I know that I always want to be respectful and honorable and kind, but please, this is, it's just so much about, I don't take instructions from people who quite often aren't paying my bills. So let's not get it twisted that we're open and, but I've really had people come and say, why did you do this like this? And I'm like, what's your business?
Yeah.
So.
So we're doing really good on time. Now we've gotten a couple questions, but I feel like you've answered most of them along the way. People were asking if you sort of talking a lot about like your philosophies around sort of teaching or sort of helping people translate Nigerian cuisine. They asked if you could sort of expand on some of your sort of expat philosophies, and so I feel like we covered a lot of it. You definitely discovered, you talked about new Nigerian cuisine, that framework. You gave us the origin story. So I think we did good on questions so far. If anybody else has any questions, certainly put them in the comments. I wonder if you're thinking about, because again, I feel like I heard someplace that the last couple of years has been transition for you to thinking, you sort of working outside of geology and really focusing more fully on this sort of culinary project. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that's like, because I think that's another sort of the best kept secret a lot of times. There's a lot of folks who are doing this really sort of high, like a solid, serious, entrenched food work, aren't doing it full time, right? Like this is hard work. It does not pay very well, but it's forever work, right? It's the sort of soul work, and I wonder about what life in food fully looks like. I mean, I'm in this transition of looking at my life. I'm a chef first, and my life is food all the time. But moving to a more cultural space and imagining a life that is funded fully and sort of focused fully in this particular space. So I wonder if someone who's 2 years into it, and with that kind of perspective, what that looks like.
So I worked straight out of school. I went to 2 universities. So I was a bit of a late into like the workspace, but I worked as a geologist for 15 years. And I was pretty unhappy for most of that time. And it's no way to live, you know. But it did really set me up on several levels. It gave me skills. It gave me a skill set with regards to framing my work, travel, presenting, thinking, you know, kind of correlating ideas and marshalling them into projects almost. So that was a great benefit. And I think the other thing it helped me with was it helped me understand my time, right? Because I started doing a bit of contract work, freelance work when I worked full time. And because I had a salary, I was able to make sure that whatever I was charging was commensurate with that. And so I kind of was able to put a value on my time. But I knew that it was time. I wanted to go back to school. Honestly, that was one of the main reasons I left. Well, that was the second reason, because the first one was I was unhappy. So I wanted to go back to school. Initially, I thought I wanted to study food media, but then I thought about it for a few months. Abori is this community that Chef Michael Elegbede and I and a couple of other people came together last year to found. And we started off with a food design summit. As part of that summit, I curated and created a Nigerian food and drink exhibition, right? And it was just amazing because when the process of creating that really showcased the abundance of what there was in Nigeria. And just reading comments from Nigerians, I was like, oh, like it was mind-blowing. And these were all simple things. It was just that they were all gathered together in one place. And because of that, you know, my mind has always been around, how do we archive? How do we preserve? So I'm going back to school in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be studying museum and cultural management, because I feel like that is, for me, that's the next step in real, like I have all these ideas and these thoughts and these ways and methods to preserve things, but I want to learn a little bit more so I can put that into context and hopefully use it to influence how we archive, document, organize information around Black food, Black cuisine, Black culture, and all of that. Leaving work wasn't easy though, because, you know, money, but my most extreme excesses are limited quite often to grocery shopping. The occasional kitchen gadget, actually between books and groceries, that's where most of my money goes. But I think before I left, I had to make sure that I did a few things that I hadn't even thought about before, like how much do you spend a month? I didn't have like a monthly budget because, you know, I was earning a constant income. But once I was able to kind of figure out the finance side, I was like, okay, I'm going to take this time off. I'm going to spend the first few months resting and sleeping, because I felt like I hadn't been on sleep. Yeah, I hadn't had enough sleep for the years before that. But I couldn't even really sleep because life happens, right? You're not just going to be sitting around. But I found it incredibly rewarding. I haven't missed a single day. I haven't ever thought, oh my God, I miss work and I wish I was back there. And that's not the same for everyone. For me, that was it for me. And I've had to think about, okay, how do I want to work? How do I want to make a living? It's been beneficial for me to have multiple skills, right? So I've done, in the time when I left, I was able to do contract work as a project manager, because most of my work in Shell as an exploration geologist was around projects. So I had project management experience over 15 years. I love photography, so I was able to work as a photographer, like do amateur food photography, or like digital photography for brands and times. I've done food styling, then I've done the content creation. Because I also have a blog and I create content, but I also have a strategy, not one that I even thought was clearly defined, but I have a strategy around how I create the kind of things I want to share, what the goals and all of that. I've been able to do work in content marketing where I'm informing brands about strategy and direction and simple things they can do to transform their content. So for me, it's like, how far, we have all these interests. Can we develop one or two of them and find ways to integrate them with our core love? So for me, it's all back to the kitchen. It's all back to food, right? But I can create seasonal produce calendars for people. There's so much more that I can do with this one love.
Yeah.
And it's why I like to coach and mentor people and talk to people, because there's a way of thinking that, why don't we explore? I'm all about exploring all the different ways. So I always encourage people to, if you like illustrating, I thought I would be an illustrator. I thought I'd be able to illustrate. If you like illustrating, explore that. See how you bring your core desires and loves, But yes, into it and see spaces, but also critically for me on this journey living in North America, I had the incredible guidance of a lady. Her name is Erin McDowell. And I remember just like, yeah. She's been, I had, pardon?
The pastry chef?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a discussion. I had a discussion with her a few months ago, and I told her about the kind of things I wanted to do with food. And she was able to advise me and direct me to spaces that I wouldn't have considered, that have given me so much, that are giving me so much joy. And just having someone who has knowledge of the space,
yes,
who can see in ways that you can't. Like, I have publications that I want to write for, but there are other publications that I could possibly write for that I don't know, or haven't thought about, or haven't considered in that light. And it takes someone else, to see that and to help direct, And I feel like that's the kind of openness that we need to offer each other. I know that there's a lot of competitiveness, a lot of, shouldering, but there's an openness that we need to be able to give to human beings, people who are seeking a path, who are seeking direction, and just really help them on that journey. And these months have been.
Well, this is okay. So this is a kind of question just for me, because I've been thinking a lot recently about. It's been in my spirit the last couple of years, but definitely over the last year or so. You talked about wanting to sort of study food, to find degrees in food studies, and my main struggle has been this notion around the imagination of academic spaces to sort of see and value food culture as a central discipline, right? Like, we can talk a lot about, like, I think it's so interesting you talked about museum studies, because I think that's one of the lanes that I've been finding probably the most latitude in terms of like what a degree, what the process of that degree will allow you to apply to the work you want to do. But I wonder sometimes about, I feel like we like a decade away from a time where there'll be fruitful food studies as a real discipline. But like, this sort of like, I think, again, go back to Verna May Grozen, right? Like her PhD is in this kind of anthropological space, but wondering about sort of because you talk, I don't know, something about the way you think about your practice is sort of all these disciplines that will serve this overall mission of defining Nigerian cuisine. It does not have a particular way of looking. It's not one particular discipline, but it's all in service of like sort of preservation and whatever that's going to look like and be valuable for someone else consuming it. And so museum studies becomes important. But I wonder about, I don't know, do you find, where were you looking when you were originally trying to get into the space? Because I mean, there are the limited number of spaces that are actually thinking about food culture.
So at first, I applied for a PhD at Brown, and I didn't get in because the things that I was pursuing, I was really looking at the relationships between West African cuisine and Black diasporic cuisines, and how West African cuisine has made an impact on not just the cuisines of the world, but also on the pockets, how Black West African cuisine has literally fueled the Industrial Revolution and brought Europe and America the fortunes that they so greatly hold on to now. So I didn't get into Brown because there wasn't a match within their faculty and what I wanted to do. I applied to NYU for food studies master's. I got in, but then I was in the process of moving to Canada, and so it didn't work out. I had to decline, and I agree with you that we're not there yet. I want to see Black cuisines from Africa through the Caribbean, the American South, fully represented in food media curriculums. I want to see them front and center. I want to see those links very well defined, not loosely and not flippantly. So I think starting with preservation is a good beginning, and then we can shape. And sometimes, and we can think about how a lot of this education does not necessarily need to be in the formal walls and confines of these institutions. I'm just thinking about how can we create spaces, toolkits, and learning guides and talks like this, just to really progress, make us progress. But I need to say, guys, thank you for all your comments. I've seen all of them. I really appreciate them. I can't respond to all of them, but I'm grateful to everyone who's joined.
This has been brilliant, because you've been brilliant. People are going off and getting their life because you're brilliant. We got about 6 to 7 minutes left. And I feel like we haven't really, y'all have been going off and haven't really been asking a lot of particular questions, but I feel like it's because you've been hitting so many pearls that questions have been answered along the way. But I guess I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, because this collective is really fascinating to me. And I think probably because of the way Clay and Colleen have formed Black Food Folks, this idea of, can you some more about learning guides?
Learning guides. So the learning guides would just be like short instructions about particular topics and themes. I'm currently working on a project that is, it's called Coast to Coast, and it's exploring this West African influence on Europe and America, but also the foodways, politics and capitalism, and then just extracting some of the learnings out of that. And I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to talk and share more. But I'm hoping to share it at the end of October. So let's go back to this community.
Yeah. Well, because this is the thing, right? I read this piece a while ago about, it was this notion around interrogating food media, but it was really more about this idea about restaurants being the only battleground for sort of defining food culture. And I don't agree. I think that the much more powerful space, the space at least that is going to endure and be applicable to people globally, is really publishing, right? Books, I'm talking about writing in terms of blogs or digital spaces that are archived, that are intentional and are in our own words and are consumable beyond the moment, right? Like I appreciate, again, like I'm a chef first. I trained my whole life. I've lived my entire professional life as a professional chef, but there's something particular about the clarity and the receipt of a book, the receipt of a resource that is searchable, archivable, etc. And so much of the work you're doing is really about that forever work of defining the times in which you cook, but also defining a cuisine for folks that is going to live on beyond this moment. And I wonder about the buy-in of a collective, right? Like you're talking about a collective of, from what you're saying, is food creatives across disciplines, folks who maybe, while surely Nigerian, each probably have different frameworks or different ideas about what that looks like, and what community building looks like, to my mind, is really this kind of collective movement. And so I wonder if you could just end with, because again, we're getting kind of close to the end, but just talk a little bit about what that looks like.
For me, it's, within the world of, let me take Abori, for instance, right? We came together, we put on a food summit looking at how to create sustainable food systems, both in all aspects, from written, oral documenting through to on the farm, in the garden, And one of the things I realized was, on the team we had chefs. I'm a home cook. You had a home cook, and you had the photographer, you had the designer. Like, it takes this combined effort to build a community space where people can think broadly, right? Too often we're pigeonholed. And I think just the bringing together, and it's why I love collaborations. I love to collaborate with people because I learn so much. So how we, whether it's stepwise, whether it's as a larger group, how are we coming together with a variety of strengths to create something that has a common purpose and goal, right? How are we bringing that love for photography, the expertise of photography, of writing, of cooking. So Abori was a week-long thing. We had field trips. We went to farms. We went to the market, right? We had talks around media, around growing. We had a farmer's market at the end. But we also had pop-up experiences and dining experiences. So for me, food is more than eating. Food is beyond the table. It's all those, everything about life is present in a plate of food. So how do we bring that united, that varied, all the varied bits that go on to create that plate, from even the pottery, like from even the art of creating that serveware. And it's just, I know that this is a gift that God has given me that will, I wake up hopeful because there are all these dimensions and aspects to navigate with food. And I'm incredibly thankful that I get to experience that as pure joy. Yes.
Oh, so that's perfect way to end. Like you just perfect. That's exactly right. So folks, please, if you are not already familiar, which I don't know how you could not be, but if you are already familiar, please follow us over on Kitchen Butterfly. Here on Instagram, you can follow her blog, kitchenbutterflyaswell.com. And just keep current, because from her Instagram lives to her feed, just to the writing you'll find, also, just all the talks, TED Talk, etc. She's just so clear about the space she occupies, and don't we all want that kind of clarity so we can all kind of contribute something?
Thank you. It's a journey. It's a process. Like I said, I'm in my 40s, right? It's a journey. It's not, I didn't just arrive, and I still have a long ways to go, but thank you for this opportunity. Honestly, thank you to everyone who joined. It means a lot. And hopefully we have more opportunities to talk, to converse, to get to know each other, help each other, because that's the goal, right? To really support each other, regardless of race, culture, or creed. So thank you, Therese. It's been amazing. I'm so glad. Sending you love. Have a good weekend.
You too. You too.
Bye.
Bye, yeah. Ugh, that was so good, y'all. So yeah, if you aren't, just follow Ozoz because her like every now and then you catch like a good old just she'll be live and I'll go on and she's making some just gorgeous flatbread or thinking about some combination of ingredients that I hadn't thought of. But it's just such thoughtful work and I think this particular moment we're all in search of a way to be clear about the work we do, right? The space we occupy. And she has such a beautiful practice, a beautiful way of framing a practical application of that work. So check her out, follow. I'll be saving this, so definitely follow her and check out her website and Google her so you can watch her TED Talk and all of that. All right, talk to y'all soon.